I've seen a lot of comments from people that are like, oh, he's reviewing the Ultra Beast. Just wait until he sees Kartana, and it's time to look at this Pokemon. And oh my goodness, we are already off to a terrifying start. That is a Grass Steel typing. So if you're already well acquainted with Ferrothorn, you should know Kartana pretty well. But that doesn't make it better. That it has two weaknesses, fighting and fire. That's it. I think that when it comes down to Kartana and even Ferrothorn, like, this is weakness in the truest sense of the word. That this is the only realistic way of taking down this Pokemon. It's also pretty crazy because when you look at it, it's like, okay, we get 4 times fire weakness. If we hit fire, we're dead. But everything else that we deal with is absolutely nuts. Now look at this. Tons of resistances, even the poison immunity. Only half of the things in the game, half of the typings in the game can actually affect us. So that's pretty ridiculous right there. And then we go and look at it. It's going to also have some good offensive coverage on that Grass Steel. Hit Fairy, Ice, Rock, Ground, and Water pretty well. And then we look at Kartana's stats. And this is where it gets scary, because having 2 weaknesses on Ferrothorn, that's already difficult enough, because it's like, okay, I have to bring in my fire type Pokemon, I have to hit Ferrothorn. Sometimes Ferrothorn can even survive fire type attacks, or you have to get a really strong hit in there to even face the Ferrothorn. Well, on a sweeper, it means a lot more. It means that, hey, you have one option, you have one chance to stop this thing before it gets going with its very limited weaknesses. So that's why this is such a wild Pokemon to break down. And then the Ultra Beast stats. This is what Xurkitree needed. It needed like a 100 something speed. Forget about the other stats. Maybe go special, because that's kind of how electric type Pokemon work and all. But a 181 attack stat, that is way too filthy. And then we also have like the 131 defense. Like the 131 defense with the 59 hit points is so weird, because like specially we're not surviving much of anything. Even neutral hits will be able to challenge us pretty easily, but then like 59 hit points in the 131 defense, so we can even tank up like neutral hits, whatever few neutral hits we can find physically, and then we can still dish out the damage. And then 109 speed. 109 speed, that is the weirdest number, because it's on the fringe of balanced and broken. Like if it was a 110, 111, 116 speed or something like that, then this Pokemon would be unstoppable. But 109 gives it just a little bit enough of a weakness to where certain Pokemon can outscarf it and maybe even respawn, and we only outspeed 100 base speed Pokemon, but that's still a lot. So this Pokemon finds like weird ways where it just excels and then does way too much damage to everything. So let's go hop on over to Cerebi. I just want to bring up like a stat chart as well. Kartana, 3rd highest attack. So 7th generation, just like, yeah, let's go and throw in the 3rd highest attacking Pokemon, just shy of Heracross, a Mega, and just shy of Mewtwo, a Mega Legendary. So just for straight up stats, no funny business, can still have an item. You thought Rayquaza was terrifying. Nope, Kartana edges out in damage just a little bit. So that's kind of what we're dealing with a non-mega right there. And then we can also go and check out the moveset. It's already off to a great start. Level 0, Sacred Sword. That's already, like, the target stat changes don't affect this attack damage. So if they're trying to boost defenses, you can just like walk on up and be like, hey, that's not gonna work. So there's something to deal with right there. Then we just get like a lot of slashy kind of moves. We get the Night Slash, we get the Aerial Ace, we get the False Swipe, we get the X Scissor, Leaf Blade. We get all kinds of things. Air Slash, Psycho Cut. So we go and slash them. We even have the Guillotine. Like, you have to speed something a hit with a Guillotine just for the laughs, and it might actually work or something like that. But overall, we're gonna have to piece together, and then like you don't really get too much else out of the TMs. It's pretty much the same things that we also saw, the Swords Dance, the X Scissor, stuff like that. Then hopping into Pokemon Showdown, we're gonna see how Kartana works, and it just shows straight up moveset. This is pretty much all you're running forever. The Sacred Sword, Leaf Blade, Smart Strike, and Night Slash. And I feel like if this Pokemon didn't get Night Slash, it would be a lot easier to deal with, because this actually hits through those steel Pokemon. This hits through Pokemon like Aegislash that would normally be able to just laugh at this Pokemon. Like, look at that set. That set would do nothing to an Aegislash, but then now you have to challenge it. Now you're getting into some really weird scenarios. You have to King Shield and then Sacred Sword, then hope you have enough damage boosting, and then you have to find your way through it, and the Night Slash is still insane amounts of damage. So that just changes up. It means that it can't be fully walled right there. So Night Slash is going to be very important. And then as for the stats, oh, 230. Oh, it's a 233. It's a 233, and you still get to run a Life Orb on it at level 50, and that's a Jolly Nature. Like, if we're running Adamant, the numbers just get even scarier from there, but that's kind of like a tricky thing, is that you have to run the Jolly Nature, that you have to outspeed as many things as possible on that 109 base speed, and then Beast Boost. You can't Leech Seed it, so you can't try to outstall it with like some kind of desperate play out of a Ferrothorn or some kind of Pokemon like that. You can't just bring in the Amoonguss. Like, the Amoonguss looks like it would wall this Pokemon off pretty well, right? Well, no, you can't Spore it, so you lose a lot of things. It's also that Steel typing. Can't even poison it. So a lot of that's why it's so bad. That's why it's so bad to put this tanky ability, or tanky typing on a Pokemon that isn't supposed to be a tank. And then it just goes and it kills everything, because it gives you less ways of stopping. And then after a Beast Boost, 181 attack with Life Orb at +1, nothing lives. I think that's the best way to break it down, nothing lives. So it really shows that you have to force this thing out with a Pokemon that's faster, a Scarf Pokemon with a Fire type attack, or something like that. But at least no matter what happens with a 59 hit points and a 31 special defense, pretty much any Fire type attack will knock this Pokemon out, even if it's from like a hidden power, non-stab, weak little toss of a hit. It should be enough to deal with it because the stats are so low. So that's something to consider. It seems like Ferrothorn might actually become a little less popular because everyone was already running Fire to deal with Ferrothorn and even the Scizor. Now we're looking at like now Kartana is going to add a whole new level to everyone, making sure Fire is kill it with Fire. Kill it with Fire. It's an Ultra Beast. It's freaky. It shouldn't be in our dimension anyways. Kill it with Fire. So another thing that people are talking about is the Choice Scarf. So Adamant Choice Scarf, still a respectable amount of damage. Still a lot of potential too. Like, if you outspeed something and then you can't, like, the Choice Scarf makes your 109 speed untouchable. Even with that Adamant nature, it's gonna be very hard to challenge you, but you are losing that 30% damage. Like, the weird thing about Scarf is how much of a difference that 20% damage makes when you're running it with the Life Orb, because Adamant is going to give you 10% and then Life Orb gives you 30%, so it's roughly a 20% difference right there, and that is the make or break point for a lot of KOs. However, that means you just don't lead with Kartana. You just bring it in on a weakened foe, and then the opponent has to go, well, if I switch, I die, because then I get 2-shot, and if I stay in, I die, and then everything else dies because of the Beast Boost. The only drawback, though, is that Choice Scarf. Like, once you're Scarf, once you outspeed a sweeping Pokemon of theirs, and you're locked into that move, you can make those plays around it really easy. Like, okay, it's Leaf Blade. Leaf Blade is going to be the safest, best, most reliable stab option that it has for the most amount of damage and stuff. But then now you can just wall it out with a lot of different Pokemon, because Grass isn't the best offensively. Same with the Sacred Sword. It's like, alright, he used Sacred Sword to knock me out. I just go into a Ghost type Pokemon. Now he can't do anything about it, and he has to switch out. Therefore, his Beast Boost is nullified, and now Kartana has to come in again to try to find that Choice Scarf range where it actually works and actually find something to KO. Now, another interesting thing is that some people have even talked about Jolly. And it's going to be kind of a weird setup, because say if we are running the Adamant nature with a Choice Scarf, well, that means 95 base speed Pokemon with a Choice Scarf will speed tie with us. So it's kind of like, what are you worried about? That a 95 base speed Pokemon, if it's running a speedy nature, will be able to kind of find something there against our Scarf. So that means all 100 base speed Pokemon that are running a speedy nature that are Scarf will also be able to outspeed us. But if we're running a speedy nature ourselves, and then we're also doing that, then we're going to be able to make sure we outspeed everything. And I don't know if there's any other Pokemon over 109 base speed that would actually want to use the Scarf. So the Kartana would be untouchable, and even to like some setup Pokemon, alright, we get a Pokemon coming in using Dragon Dance, or we get a Pokemon coming in speed boosting. Well, Kartana's still going to be able to deal with it even at that +1, so that's going to give us a lot of opportunity right there. And that's just kind of the weird breakdown as to what's going on with this Pokemon, that there's those matchups where it's make or break, that you can make it by just having insane amounts of damage, destroying everything, or if that one strange Pokemon just outspeeds you and hits you with a Fire type attack, your day ends right there. But then we have these Swords Dance set. So people are talking Swords Dance, and you have to run the Focus Sash. So there's a lot of problems right there, that if you bring, like, you have to leave with this Pokemon, or else Stealth Rock, Spikes, something like that could be a big issue for you, and then your Focus Sash means nothing. Then you're not allowed to set the Swords Dance, and now you're not as fast as a Scarf, you're not doing as much damage as a Life Orb, but this can absolutely wreck entire teams, because you set up Swords Dance. If they go for setup, then they die and you still have your Focus Sash. If they try to hit you, well then Focus Sash procs, and unless they're getting like some kind of weird after effect, you know, like Flamethrower finds that chance to burn and then burns on top of that and then adds that KO to the Flamethrower or something, you know, the weird RNG is the only thing that can really stop you at that point, because now you're +2, Now you're still outspeeding a lot, but then you're still fairly weak at the same time. That it just takes any priority to finish you off at that 1 hit points, or it also takes just a faster Pokemon, Scarf Pokemon, something like that, and then you're just going to be able to get wrecked. But the Swords Dance on a 181 base attack Pokemon, it's just going to make it to where you can kind of take out everything. And I got rid of the Smart Strike here because I already talked about the Night Slash, that I'd rather have the Night Slash against an Aegislash and against a lot of the other Pokemon that could wall me, that won't be able to wall me at +2, than I would with the Smart Strike. So a lot of people are praising the Swords Dance setup. I feel that it's also very gambly, that your best bet is just Life Orb Jolly. That if you see something that outspeeds you, you can switch out, and then you can maybe also go into like Water type Pokemon, something that'll just heavily resist those Fire type hits right there, and then you try to deal with that Pokemon, and then you bring in the Kartana. That gives you a lot more freedom. Gives you a lot more freedom to Life Orb, because you can go, oh, I can come in on this Pokemon, and I can just straight up one-shot it now, instead of, I might have to sometimes outspeed if I can set up the Swords Dance. I don't know, I feel like it's just gonna be a lot easier and a lot more effective to run it that way, even though, if you get the Swords Dance and your team isn't ready for it, you just win. And that's how, like, unfair it gets. So let's look at some damage calcs right here. So I've got the Jolly Nature Life Orb, all that crazy damage stuff, and I'm going for a Sacred Sword on the Silvally. It just kind of shows that the 181 attack is really weird because we don't have high base power moves. So we're not finding as many KOs as we would expect neutrally. That neutrally, our Leaf Blade is going to be our best option, and that's only doing 86. That has a very, very tiny chance of KO. But again, Silvally is unusually tanky. 95 defense, 95 on the hit points. So what we're going to do is we're going to start looking for those ranges where we do secure those one-hit KOs on neutral. And even then, the Sacred Sword, without that stab, still finding some difficult times against tankier Pokemon. But that's the thing about being fast. Like, your opponent has one chance to respond to you, and if they don't have fire, then it doesn't really matter in the end. So that's kind of like why the tankiness, it's so weird how this Pokemon breaks down. I wanted to go and bring up the Scarf option as well. That Scarf, again, we're losing a lot of damage that against 95 Pokemon, the Leaf Blade, really not finding it. So let's see what kind of ranges we'd have to find. Like, does 80-80 even work? Does actually 80-70? 80-70 will work for Scarf. So your average sweeping Pokemon, you know, your average defensive Pokemon won't be able to survive neutrally, even into that Scarf and stuff, but it shows that you're much more susceptible to getting walled out because you are locked into that move and your damage is cut substantially. But then when we're looking at another Pokemon, like say with the Life Orb, Jolly Nature and stuff, then that means we can go like 85? No, okay, so we're still not gonna be at that good of a range, but the 80-80 should be able to deal with it pretty well. And then we can see 80-80 with the Leaf Blade, that's about an expected range to find a very reliable KO on a neutral hit, on your strongest hit with that Leaf Blade. So then Smart Strike, it's kind of there for coverage, it's kind of there for the utility of it, which is why you can give it up for something else if you want to, but having the stab option when Leaf Blade won't work does work out pretty well, and it covers for itself, you know. Smart Strike, that's going to be resisted by water, Leaf Blade hits that super effective, and then we can go and find the GG right there. Like, don't get me wrong, it still does a lot of damage. Like, I show other damage calculations of other Pokemon, I'm like, yeah, if you can find that 80-80, then you're in a good spot, and that's Kartana right there. But the way you're running it, it's either going to be a little, like, you have to look for a fairly frail Pokemon that might be able to respond to you in some kind of way if you don't have the damage, or also you're just going to be, like, giving up some weird damage numbers right here between the Scarf, between the Life Orb. Now let's see how it matches up into the Ferrothorn. I mean, full hit points, full defense, bold, just any kind of heavy defensive nature. Impish, I guess, would be better on the Ferrothorn. You know, if you have all of that, it's still a 2-hit KO on the Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn can't do anything to it. I know that that's understandable because of the way that the typing breaks down, but say Kartana was a Bug Steal instead. It would make so much more sense. It would be so much easier to stop because then maybe Ferrothorn could be a response that you get your Leech Seed in. You have Iron Barbs, you have Rocky Helmet, then you could tick it down, you could protect through it. You'd be a 3-hit KO Pokemon. You could at least weaken this Pokemon in some kind of way. You know, understand that, hey, they're going for the Sacred Sword. When Ferrothorn is on its last little bits of health, you can switch out. You can switch out right there, and then you'll be able to go into a Ghost-type Pokemon, the Leech Seed could activate, and that might be enough to take out the Kartana, but no, because of that Grass typing, you don't get to do any of that. Can't Spore it, I've already talked about this, but it just kind of shows an application that even some of like the super tanky Pokemon, some of the super nasty Pokemon that would be able to deal with it, now can't, just off of that typing. That one to go and compare it to some other Pokemon, the Pheromosa is really interesting, because it outspeeds, and it can either just straight up like KO on the high jump kick, or it can lunge. And lunge will be enough to let it survive anything but that Smart Strike. So there we go, like the lunge, you know, it outspeeds, it lunges, and that's what Kartana can do in return, and that's also at a -1. So then we can just double lunge with the Pheromosa. That's our beast boost. Now Pheromosa can start to take off as well with insane amounts of damage. But as you might notice, the Smart Strike is still a high chance of KOing. So, like I said, with the Swords Dance set, I kind of took off the Smart Strike, but in this is like one of those situations where Smart Strike can still work depending on the coverage. Now, it's also like, what does the meta dictate? What are you going to be more scared of? And since Smart Strike is kind of the one you give up, just be aware that if you do give it up, there are some other Pokemon that now will be able to respond to you, even though, like, it depends. Like, I would take the high jump kick if I wasn't sure of the Smart Strike or something like that, but even in, like, the weird scenarios, they could lunge you and then still kind of shut you down with a quick lunge on the Pheromosa. That's safer than the high jump kick. Like, if you have a Ghost-type Pokemon on your team, you know, it's like, that's too threatening for the Pheromosa. Pheromosa, like, can't have that happen too often. It needs to get that snowball going. Now let's look at Kartana into the Sea Dog. So this is a crazy matchup, like Adamant Nature, no investment, Flamethrower just does insane amounts of damage, so it actually might be worth the Flamethrower attack, that you technically have that 4th move slot open, that you go Heavy Slam, Autotomize, Earthquake, something. Now, I said the Seed Bomb because that's going to help out quite a lot, that Heavy Slam is going to be resisted by Water-type Pokemon, then you can go and use the Seed Bomb, try to find something super effective, get the most damage that you can out of that, but by running the Flamethrower instead, yeah, Water-type Pokemon still might be a problem, but if you already have +1 the Beast Boost, you can still like 2-shot on a Heavy Slam because you're so ridiculously tanky, and then the Flamethrower just comes in, so you Autotomize, you outspeed, and then Flamethrower is going to be enough, but it's not enough to switch in on. That you switch into a Sacred Sword, and then you just die, because then you get outsped and die. But at the same time, if you're bringing it as a return Pokemon, even if, like, that's kind of like the weird thing about Ultra Beast, is that you have to imagine every revenge scenario as something where they're coming in on +1. So, Kartana KO something, that's +1. Sea Dog is still safe. You can go Autotomize, now you're outspeeding, and now you're able to go and crush this Pokemon, and say if it is like the Adamant Nature on the Choice Scarf instead, that's, I actually don't think, okay, so it depends like if you can read the Choice Scarf as well, because at that +1, it is going to be too much, but if you know it's Scarfed, then it's a free switch, but then, okay, so you switch in, you Flamethrower, but then you are at 10% health, and then that's not safe to Autotomize against anything, but it just kind of shows, if you need to stop the Kartana at all costs, it can be done in different ways, Choice Scarf or Life Orb, but again, like with Kartana, you'll already know if it's a Life Orb, that if it throws out a hit and takes damage in return, Life Orb, if it doesn't, Choice Scarf, if it's Swords Dance, Focus Sash. So you can kind of see what Kartana is going to be up to and then respond that way. But even at the +1, you come in, you Autotomize, you eat up its hit, and then you blow it up with a Flamethrower. And if they switch out because you know you have that Flamethrower threat, well now that Pokemon is in the same position Kartana was in, because now it has it set up, it's ready to one-shot everything. So it just kind of shows the wild nature of Ultra Beast right there. And then I would just bring up some other Pokemon like the Gengar. Gengar outspeeds, 110 base speed. Outspeed, Shadow Ball is enough damage without an item. That you just go Timid, and then Shadow Ball is enough. Life Orb, Choice Specs, whatever it is that you are running. So it kind of shows that it isn't unstoppable. Kartana is at least not completely, stupidly unstoppable. So if it is getting outsped, just a random thing can take it out on that special attack. So special attack Pokemon might get a little stronger from just Kartana existing. The Flamethrower, the just random, like I said, random fire tech. Just go do that and go win some battles. I think that's all there is to it. So yeah, what a crazy Pokemon, what a crazy breakdown. So if you guys enjoy the video, hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.